Week one recap. You check out my short. I recapped a little bit of week zero, a couple of those teams. So you check that out on my shorts. Week one recap though. Kicked off Thursday night. We had Boise State versus South Florida. South Florida thumped Boise State 34-7. Boise State just didn't look like, I guess you can call it, was a playoff hangover. They didn't like the team they were last year. I know it was a lot of changes, a lot of guys leaving, especially the main guy we all know, Ashton Jeanty, going to the draft. But I feel like that's no excuse to go down there and put out that product on the field that you put out. That was just a terrible display right there. Especially when you look at the stat sheet, 8 red zone attempts compared to South Florida only having 4 red zone attempts. If you get in the red zone that many times, you got to get points. There's no excuse for it. To get in the red zone 8 times and not come away with points is just come away with 7 points. And I'm pretty sure that 7 points came outside the red zone. That's kind of alarming because once you get inside that 20, you need to make it a mission to get points. Whether it's 3 points or 6 points, you got to make it a mission to get those points. But South Florida, they could be legit. I haven't really looked at South Florida. I have to look at them kind of on a deeper end now. Wasn't expecting much from them, but the quarterback looked good. But they definitely like a team to look out for. I'll be watching their week 2 matchup to see how they come out. I'm expecting them. A lot of people are now putting them up there as the team that can make the surprise group of 5 team. I feel like they're a team that could show up, a team that could surprise a lot of people. Just a team that, they could make some noise, But they got an interesting matchup the next couple weeks. They got Florida, got Miami, both are on the road. So that's going to be definitely a true test to see what type of team do you have, Was it just a fluke win? Was Boise State just bad? Is this a bad Boise State team? That's something we're going to have to find out. But they'll get tested the next couple weeks at Florida and at Miami. Boise State, could it just have been them coming down to that humidity in Florida and they're getting to them, them not used to that. We'll see. They got a couple of light games. You got Eastern Washington Air Force, so we'll see how they look, but definitely wasn't a good showing. But it's still early, week 1, so you don't really look too much into those things. A lot of people are gonna make a lot of overreactions off of one game. You can't do that. It's a long season. I feel like you start making your statements around week 6. Once you get to that midpoint, between week 4 and week 6, you start making your statements. A lot of people are going to have a lot of overreaction to the first week of the season, and that's pretty much how the media goes. They make a lot of overreaction statements. Those headline grabbers, as they call them. A lot of first-time head coaches took some losses. Norfolk State lost to Townsend 27-7. Delaware State lost to Delaware 35-17. Michael Vick and Deshaun Jackson, those 2 guys, well-known NFL guys, first-time head coaches, took 2 losses. This is going to be a filling out year for them, especially smaller programs. It's going to be a filling out year. They're really not going to be judged on this year. The administration are going to let them get some recruiting classes in, try to get some talent in there, try to attack the portal, to try to build up the program, give them about 3 years, and see where they can have those guys at. But definitely was a tough loss by both of those teams. Charles Huff and Southern Miss took a loss to Mississippi State. I was there in attendance at that game. Me and my uncle went to check them out. I wanted to see, how the guys look. They took a loss to Mississippi State, 34-17. The game was close at halftime. They thought it was about 13-10 at halftime. I feel like Charles Huff scheduled this game just as a measuring stick to see, okay, what type of squad do I have? Because, he just got in. I know he brought a lot of guys from Marshall, but he still has to get a full recruiting offseason, I saw about a good 10 to 15 guys on the sideline on recruiting passes. So it's going to take some time, and I think they scheduled the Mississippi State game as a good measuring stick to see where exactly do they stand at. Because they could have easily picked a Tuskegee or a Daytona or a Robert Morrison like West Virginia did, just a feel-good win. But instead, they went the opposite direction. Hey, let's get a team that's not on the upper echelon, but they're not in that FCS level, because we all know Mississippi State is kind of in that below average if you want to say, depending on what side of the SEC line you stand on. But for me, they're more in that below average. Probably even below whatever below average is. They're below that. There was kind of a measuring stick. I feel like he used that as a measuring stick to see, okay, what type of team am I working with? They play Jackson State next week, so that'll probably be a win for them to get them to 1-1. But yeah, that kind of what that showed me. It was a measuring stick game. They're not a powerhouse, but there wasn't an FCS opponent to give you that old feel good win, that old hurrah win. Like he wanted to see what type of team he has, and I think he saw what he has, and he sees what him and his staff has to work on. But yeah, those three new coaches took L's. Dan Mullen, 2-0. Struggled at first. I talked about it in my short. UNLV played Idaho State, Idaho. They barely beat them. It was a slugfest, but they won. Came back this week, played Sam Houston, beat them 38-21. Now they are 2-0. So Dan Mullen back in the saddle, got his team 2-0. It'll be interesting to see how they go. I'll be keeping up with Dan Mullen and his squad, man. But that was a good game. It was a good game. I checked out some of that game. It was a good game, and it'd be interesting to see how far Dan Mullen takes this team. Wake Forest, Kennesaw State was a surpriser. Kennesaw State, a lot of people are leaving dead in the dirt. That came out. Wake Forest beat them 10-9. It was a good game. I'm not gonna say a lot of people wouldn't like because of no offense, basically, but Kennesaw State had opportunities to win that game. In all honesty, it should have been an upset. Kennesaw State should have won that game. It was a good game. Wake Forest, I don't know if either Kennesaw State sneaky good or Wake Forest is just really bad. I'm going to go with the latter and say Wake Forest is probably just really bad this year. Or you can just say, hey, week 1 jitters, But that was a crazy game itself. Auburn-Baylor was a good game itself, too. Auburn won that game 38-24. Of course, Auburn breaking in a new quarterback. Jackson Arnold came from Oklahoma. Went 11 for 17, 108 yards. No TDs in the air, but 2 TDs on the ground. 137 rushing yards. I don't know how sustainable that is in the SEC. Watching that game, Baylor played a lot of soft coverage. They didn't really load the box. You go against teams that actually got DBs that can run with your receivers. You're going to have teams bringing down the safety, putting 8-man boxes on you, and now forcing Jackson Arnold to throw the ball. Like I said, he threw 11 for 17 completed passes. So 108 yards. But how often are you going? 16 rushing attempts for 130 yards. 16 times rushing as a quarterback, you got to be careful. One of those times you can get a good licking and then you're out. So that's something they got to be wary of, But, they won that game against Baylor. Colorado took a loss to Georgia Tech, 27-20. Tough loss for Colorado. You hate to see it. Deion, breaking in a new quarterback, new receivers, completely got new coaches on the staff. So it was a tough loss, especially at home, but I wouldn't worry too much about them. Georgia Tech is a good team. They returned some guys, especially their starting quarterback, Hayden King. So I wouldn't look too much into this loss. Now, next week, if they mess around and take a loss, then that could be alarming. Because next week they play Delaware. You think that would be a good opponent for them. So we'll see how that goes. You just hope that, Deion can right the ship and they go back and watch the film and see what they need to correct, But defense looked good. I will say the defense does look more improved than last year on the Colorado side. It does look good. Georgia Tech, they look good. Hayden King went 13 for 20, 143 yards, and then, of course, same thing with Jackson Arnold. He's a runner. 19 rushing attempts for 156 yards. How sustainable is that? We're going to see. It's still early in the season. He took some hits. He's going to be in the ice bath, but you gotta, try to minimize as many hits as possible for your starting quarterback. Because last thing you need is for your quarterback to get knocked out because you're just constantly running quarterback power, quarterback zone, or on a lot of the read options. He's pulling it and getting out the back door. You want to minimize how many times he gets hit. Tennessee, Syracuse, that was kind of a barn burner, more on the Tennessee side, 45-26. I hate. I was kind of rooting for Syracuse. Fran Brown, he's doing a good job over there. I feel like. I was expecting to be more close than what it was. Syracuse kind of tried to make it interesting towards the third quarter. But ultimately Tennessee just overpowered them. I think it really just came down to the trenches. I think Fran Brown's steady building up the trenches up there in Syracuse, but overall Tennessee just had the more weapon on offense, of course. So Tennessee came up with that victory, 45-26. It'd be interesting to see how both teams move forward. It'd be interesting. Syracuse has UConn, which, UConn got 9 wins last year, but we'll see. It's a new team, new year, so we'll see if it's the same UConn team, And then, of course, Tennessee gets East Tennessee State, but after that, week 3, they have Georgia coming to town. So that'll be the real test for Tennessee when they play Georgia. Georgia did beat Marshall, kind of a cupcake game. As we know, the SEC plays a lot of cupcake games, but now they're going to 9-game conference schedule, so we'll see too many of those cupcake games. Texas, Ohio State, the big one. Ohio State won 14-7. Archie Manning, he looked like a guy that hasn't played in a big time game. Pretty much how I would sum it up. He looks like a kid that this is his first time playing in a big time game against a big time opponent, and he looked just like that. A lot of missed throws, pressure was getting to him, and just he was very out of sync with his receivers. Defense looked good. Texas has a defense. I will say that they have a defense. Julian Sayin did throw for 126 yards, 13 for 20. But other than that, I feel like defense did what they could. Not too much you can ask. Offense got to put up points. They held OSU to 77 yards rushing. So I feel like, at the end of the day, offense got to score points. We did see the one bomb Manning had, which looked good, but you got to get repetition on that. I feel like he's going to get better. I feel like Sark's going to get better. They got San Jose State coming to Texas next week. So that'll be kind of a revamped game. And then even after that, they got UTEP. So those 2 games right there, Sam Houston State. So really, you got San Jose State, UTEP, and you have Sam Houston State. So you have 3 teams, San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston, that those are going to be kind of tune-up games. Because after those 3 games, you got Florida and Oklahoma back-to-back. So those are going to be 3 games where they're really going to have to work on the fundamentals, work on timing, things of that nature, and, hope that him and his receivers can get it on the same page, and then that they can keep establishing that run game. They ran for 166 yards, so that was pretty good. Keep it now. You just keep working on that. O-line keeps meshing together, and you go from there. So Ohio State, they got Grambling coming to town. Ohio, they got Washington week 5. Who knows? Washington, kind of hard to judge on them. Ohio State might not get no real competition until week 10 when they play Penn State. That's just how I look. You got Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin. Those are the teams you got. You got Grambling, Ohio, Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Illinois, Brent Bielema, his squad. He's gonna have those guys ready to play. If I had to say a game that could sneak up on Ohio State before they get to Penn State, would be Illinois. We already know how Brent is. His squads play hard. And they're at Illinois, so that could be a potential dark horse for a game where people are gonna pick Ohio State to win the game, but we're gonna see how Illinois is gonna come to play. Illinois, I'm not gonna say they got a chance to win the game, but if it's one of those games where if you're not watching the whole game, you turn on in the third quarter and it's 13-12 or it's 20-13, it's a close game. It's just one of those games. And if Illinois is playing them close, we know how it is when you get in that fourth quarter and the game is close. It's anybody's game. So Texas has 3 games to kind of get ready before they hit that SEC run, and then Ohio State is kind of just at this point it look like they're going to be on cruise control. They lost a lot of guys, but I feel like Ohio State, for the people that remember Alabama, the years where Alabama would win, guys go to the draft, and then next thing you know, people are like, oh, they lost 8-9 guys on defense and 5 guys on offense. They're not going to be good. Next thing you know, they don't reload it, and they got guys that were backups on that championship team now starters, and now those guys are wreaking havoc. So, Ohio State is they're kind of in that range right now. they reloaded. They lost a lot of guys to the draft. They reloaded, and it shows. A lot of people didn't know a lot of the guys that were going to be on the defensive side of the ball. Well, after the Texas game, a lot of people know those guys' names. So they reloaded, and it shows. And they played defense, played outstanding. Offense did what they had to do. They probably Julian Sain, like I said, he looked good. They just have to, same thing kind of with Archie. They have to keep meshing. Jeremiah Smith, I feel like he did what he could do. 6 receptions. He was targeted 10 times for 43 yards, no touchdown. Cardinal Tate had 2 targets for 49 yards, 1 being for a touchdown. So, he had 126 yards, but that could definitely improve. He could definitely be one of those guys that's throwing for 200, 300 yards per game. Especially with the receiving core they have. But overall, it was a good game. It was overall a good game. Indiana struggled against Old Dominion. They pulled it out 27-14. Bama FSU. FSU came away 31-17. People were ready to make memes about Tommy Costello. Tommy, he wasn't going for it. People know what he said. They ain't got Nick Saban to save him no more. His quote. They was ready to make memes about the kid, and the kid showed up and showed out. It was, I think he knew he put himself on a pedestal, and he knew what he had to do. He knew he had to come out and play lights out. He had to play with his hair on fire, and he did, stat line, you look at it, not that impressive. 9 for 14, 152 yards. He had 16 rushing attempts for 78 yards and a rush TD. And, pretty much most of their TDs came off the ground. They had 1, 2, 3, 4 different guys rush for a touchdown. You can't ask for nothing better than that, Mainly, FSU dominated on the ground. That I think was the alarming part. Me and one of my buddies, he's a Alabama fan. We were talking about it. They dominated on the ground game. Passing game, Bama had 254 yards passing to FSU's 152 yards passing. But rushing side of the ball, FSU had 230 yards rushing compared to Bama's 87 yards rushing. Anytime you get that big of a difference in running game, it's probably going to be a long night. Your defense is tired. They're getting leaned on by those 300-pound offensive linemen. It's tough on them, So they won the ground game. That's just something, Bama has to work on. Ty Simpson looked good. Like I said, threw for 254 yards. You can't ask for more than that. Just got to work on some things, work on the ground game. He was hovering around 50% accuracy, which isn't bad, especially for a first-time starter, especially in that type of environment. You're at Doak Campbell Stadium. It was loud, everybody knows you go to Doak Campbell Stadium, it's going to be loud. So he did pretty good. I feel like I said, the D-line really got leaned on. They was missing one of their starter D linemen, their D tackle, Keenan. They were missing him. He was injured. He's going to be out a couple games. But overall, that's next man up mentality. FSU just leaned on their D-line, and they got yards, and it showed, So we'll see how they bounce back. They do have a cupcake game next week. To any of the schools that watch, I'm not being offensive. I'm not saying your school is weak. I'm just saying in terms of if you've been around the SEC like I have, that's what people refer to those type of games, cupcake games. And so they play Louisiana Monroe next week. So that'd be kind of a tune-up game for Ty Simpson in the offense. The defense kind of reset their buttons against that Louisiana Monroe offense. And then after that, they got Wisconsin coming to town. So Wisconsin will be a good test for them. And after Wisconsin, they got to go to Georgia. So a couple of good games for them. Florida State has East Texas A&M coming to town next week, followed by Kent State, followed by Virginia. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. They'll have a couple of games, to kind of we'll really see how good he are. Like I said, it seems like Tommy might be the guy. Mike Norvell has him a quarterback. Gus Malzahn, he played with those runner type. You go back and look at the quarterbacks Malzahn has had. Tommy fits that criteria. A runner that can run the ball, and at the same time he'll get you the yards through the air as needed. So I feel like this is going to be an interesting season for Florida State. It was a good win to start the season off. And so now we'll see their next true test, I feel like, is Miami. They'll play them in week 6. So that'll be a good test for them right there. We'll see how that goes. But finally, LSU Clemson, good game, 17-10 LSU. That was one of those games where I think a lot of people didn't know which way it would go. It was kind of like, it could go either way, but a lot of people didn't know. I think it surprised a lot of people how well LSU defense were, because a lot of people, including myself, definitely thought Cade Klubnik was gonna have a breakout year. This is the year he breaks out, and so I kind of think a lot of people were shocked by it. He didn't play bad. You go 50%. How good is that? 19 for 38 for 230 yards, no TDs though. I feel like you throwing the ball around that many times, you got to score. Rushing wise though, they kind of struggled. They didn't really get the run game going. I think that also what hurt them was they couldn't get the run game going. Only 31 yards on the ground. LSU had 108. But then you look at the passing, 246 for LSU, 230 for Clemson. Gus Nussmeier went 28 for 38, 73% completion, sitting at 230 yards and one touchdown. When that one touchdown, along with the rushing touchdown from Durham, that right there was kind of set the tone. And of course, Durham went for 17 attempts for 74 yards and one touchdown. So LSU got the ground game going. Clemson couldn't get nothing going on the ground. I think that kind of hurt them. And another thing that stood out was time of possession. LSU held the ball for 37 minutes and 10 seconds, while Clemson held the ball for only 23 minutes. Big discrepancy. That's double digit in difference in the time of possession. Usually the team that's holding the ball that long, they're wearing out the defense. So their offense is possessing the ball that long. Clemson defense getting tired. I know Clemson has a lot of guys, the main two being Parker and Woods on that D line, but it can't just be Parker and Woods. Other guys are going to have to step up if Clemson is going to try to make a run for the ACC championship. What does this signal for Clemson? Nothing really. I don't see nothing changing. I think they got to just rebound. They got Troy next week. It's going to be kind of a tune-up game. And then they got to go to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech coming off a win against Colorado. They're going to be hyped for that. Georgia Tech has Gardner-Webber, which is kind of a tune-up game before they play Clemson. So that's going to be a true test for Clemson, I feel like, especially for their D-line. Like I stated earlier, Georgia Tech ran the ball well against Colorado. So we'll see how Georgia Tech run the ball against Clemson now. So that'll be a good test for them. Overall, it was a good game. LSU, on the other hand, they got Louisiana Tech next week. And that's kind of be a tune-up before they play Florida in week 3. And so that'll be a good matchup for LSU, another test for them. They play Florida. Florida does come to Louisiana, so they'll have the home field advantage. So we'll see how that game goes. But overall, though, reactions, some things I noticed. Week 1, of course, poor tackling. There was a lot of missed tackles. It was a lot. I watched a lot of games, even at the Southern Miss Mississippi State game. A lot of missed tackles. That's kind of the norm for week 1, because in practice you can't really hit like you want to. You're not going after your own teammate with malintent like you would, like if he's got a different color jersey on, So that's just one of those things that they'll get better as the season go on. Tackling will get better. I believe that. And, a lot of teams that lost, it's not the end all. It's week 1. Stuff happens. So we'll see. We got TCU, North Carolina tonight at 7. Bill Belichick's first collegiate game coaching. We'll see how that goes. I'm interested to see what schemes deployed. I'm interested to see how both teams look. It'll be interesting to see. TCU, as we know, didn't have a good year last year, so this is going to be interesting to see how they turn around and they go from there, But yeah, I'll be watching that game. I'll be back with my analysis of that game, and then either Tuesday or Wednesday we'll be back to get ready for week 2, to give you the preview for those slated games and to get you ready for week 2. College football is back. I'm loving it. And as the title says, don't bother me. It's Saturday. I'm out.